2025 is officially halfway over, and the NFL offseason is quickly coming to a close as well. So in this video, I'm going to grade how the Bengals handled this offseason. What's up, Bengals fans? John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and just like that, we're halfway into 2025. The NFL offseason is so freaking long that we're not even done with that yet. But regardless of the 3 weeks remaining until training camp begins, and then the several weeks of training camp and the preseason leading up to finally the regular season, I think now, the true midpoint of the calendar year, is a good time to grade how the Bengals offseason has been. And I'm going to do my best to encapsulate everything that's happened, from coaching hirings and firings, player acquisitions, stadium lease deals, all of it. Of course, it all started back in January when they let go of defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo and a handful of other coaches, and they hired Al Golden as DC, Scott Peters as offensive line coach, Jerry Montgomery as defensive line coach and run game coordinator, Mike Hodges as linebackers coach, Sean Desai as a senior defensive assistant, and a handful of other guys joining the defensive staff. Back then, I wasn't a huge fan of how the Bengals conducted their defensive coordinator search. I did understand the logic and reasoning behind landing Al Golden and taking him away from Notre Dame, basically give him the promotion that was 3 years in the making, since he was a linebackers coach a handful of years before. And it's obviously far too early to grade how he has been as defensive coordinator since the season hasn't even started yet, but it seems like a lot of the players are buying in to his new system, to his communication style, and to his ability to basically relate and connect with the younger player base on that side of the ball. The same can be said about Peters in the offensive line, but I really am a fan of his background as a pure teacher of the game in terms of the technical side of pass protection. So overall, I'm more of a fan of the coaching decisions that they made rather than skeptical about how they're going to turn out. In terms of the roster and how it's turned over, I think the Bengals fell a little bit short here. When looking at the external additions in a vacuum, TJ Sladen at nose tackle, Oren Burks as a backup linebacker, Samaje Perine as a backup running back, and Lucas Patrick as another piece of the puzzle to the offensive line, I think that they're all positive moves, but the Bengals should have done more here, and I think everybody knows that. They cleared out plenty of space with the expected cuts of Alex Kappa and Sheldon Rankins and Sam Hubbard's retirement, among other players that they didn't bring back. And then, of course, finally releasing Jermaine Pratt after several weeks as well, but they didn't maximize that space, and that was definitely seen through the extensions of Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. It was a great decision to give both of those guys new contracts, to make sure that T. Higgins didn't reach free agency, to make sure that Jamar Chase was taken care of well before the offseason dragged on. But the fact that they inflated both of their salary cap hits for this season, it was an unnecessary barrier that the Bengals created for themselves. They could have done more to add to this roster, to bolster the depth at certain spots, and to maybe add one or two more starters where they need them. But clearly they're confident in the coaching changes that they made to maximize the pieces that they already have in the building. There was also the draft, right? The Bengals had 6 picks in this year's draft. They drafted a defensive end in Shamar Stewart, 2 linebackers in Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter, 2 offensive linemen in Dylan Fairchild and Jalen Rivers, and a running back in Taj Brooks. I thought overall the draft class was, solid, not great, not terrible, but the first 3 picks were a little bit risky considering the fact that Shamar Stewart is a largely unproven pass rusher who is now dealing with other issues aside from what he does on the field. Demetrius Knight is a little bit on the older side as a linebacker, but he comes in ready to play immediately. And Dylan Fairchild was also considered a little bit of a reach in the 3rd round, but he has a lot of abilities and qualities that make him a day 1 starter. The most important and valuable picks also carry the most amount of risk here, which is why I thought the draft was more on the average side rather than good or bad. As for the stadium deal, let's just check that box off right there. We don't have to go any further than that. And finally, there are problems that have yet to be solved, and despite the fact that we don't have a resolution for both Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart just yet, I think the fact that they're still up in the air, it does make the Bengals look bad. There's no reason why Trey Hendrickson should still be here and not have an extension already signed to his name. The Bengals should have ripped that Band-Aid off before free agency began and traded him for a fair price, or they should have given him a fair price for an extension long before this whole thing dragged out into the offseason workout program and potentially into training camp. And it's honestly hilarious that that situation has been a thing since February, and it's arguably not even the most contentious situation on the team right now, because nobody expected to hold out with the Bengals' 1st round pick, and it just happens to be Shamar Stewart in this case. My thoughts on that matter have been very clear, and I know that some people are disagreeing with the fact that there's nuance in the situation, but at the end of the day, there is. I don't think it's a good idea for Stewart's camp to encourage him to sit out of practice and potentially ruin his chances of being a contributor as a rookie. And I don't think it's a good idea for the Bengals to not negotiate other parts of his contract instead of just forcing him to accept this new language. When you try to balance all of the things that the team has done or hasn't done this offseason, the positives and the negatives, it does kind of feel like they're in this gray area. Is it great that they have both of their receivers under contract for long term? Yes. Is it great that they have a vision on defense with a new defensive coordinator? Yes. Is it bad that they can still enter training camp with not just one, but two major distractions? Also yes. When factoring all of that in, I feel like I can't grade this offseason any higher than about a C- for the Bengals. And the reason why it's just below that true average grade of a C is because the issues that they're still dealing with could have been avoided in the first place. Giving Hendrickson a fair deal with guarantees and some security for the next handful of years should not be complicated, and it should not give the Bengals any pause. Structuring the deals that Chase and Higgins got a little bit differently so you could squeeze in some more space for some other additions, that was very easy to do as well. But that's not the route that the Bengals have taken, and because of that, they've limited themselves yet again. The good news is a C- from January to June does not define how July to December goes. The Bengals still have a ton of talent on the roster where it matters. They have continuity in certain parts of the offense and the coaching staff, and they're ready to begin the season a lot quicker than they have in years past. And now that it's July and training camp is right around the corner, it's time to put it all to the test.